And hello again from Fox News in Washington. As Donald Trump pushes his agenda in a speech to Congress this week, Democrats have picked a new chair to rebuild their party and mobilize opposition to the president. They elected former Obama Labor Secretary Tom Perez head of the Democratic National Committee. Fox News correspondent Jonathan Serri has the latest now from Atlanta.
Mr. Perez, congratulations.
With a new chairman, the Democratic National Committee hopes to rebuild the party with a 50-state strategy.
Because if we want to take back the House of Representatives, we got to take back state houses.
Right.
We got to take back governor's mansions. And we also have to make sure that we're working together on the issue of internal culture change.
So help me God.
Tom Perez, a former Obama Labor Secretary, nominated his closest competitor, Minnesota Congressman and early Bernie Sanders supporter Keith Ellison, as deputy chair in an apparent effort to unify the party's establishment and progressive wings.
If they trust me, they need to come on and trust Tom Perez as well.
Democrats say they also want to listen to another voting bloc that left the party in large numbers to support Donald Trump.
We've got to focus on working class Americans, particularly working white Americans. We've got to take an economic message to them to let them know that Democrats can create good paying jobs in America again.
We can't be bowling alone. We've got to be in partnership. The union movement is under attack. Planned Parenthood is under attack. And the Democratic Party will always be there to defend our friends.
The president weighed in early this morning with this tweet. The race for DNC chairman was, of course, totally rigged. Bernie's guy, like Bernie himself, never had a chance. Clinton demanded Perez. Joining me now from New Hampshire, Corey Lewandowski, former campaign manager for Mr. Trump, still sometimes an advisor, and now a political consultant. And Corey, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thank you for having me.
First, I want to get your thoughts about the election of Tom Perez, a relative centrist, as chair of the DNC. What does it say to you about how Democrats are going to deal with President Trump?
You know, Chris, what this says to me is that they've now put someone in the chairman of the Democratic Party who doesn't understand what's going on in America. You know, you have an opportunity, they would have had an opportunity to pick a candidate that understood what middle America is about and not someone who's just concerned about the East Coast or the West Coast. And instead what we've seen is, you know, more of the same from the Democratic Party, which is what caused them to lose this election at the presidential level. Tom Perez was a close confidant of Hillary Clinton. And if you look at the three major Democratic presidential candidates, whether it's Michael Dukakis, Mondale, Wallace, the three of them combined could not have secured enough electoral votes to become elected president of the United States. That's what this party now represents, is completely out of touch with mainstream America, understanding that their base is on the right and the far left of the political spectrum in the United States, all the way in California and in Massachusetts. And this is just a terrible decision for these guys because they're continuing to move to the left and forgetting what the real people care about.
I want to, and the reason we invited you on in the first place is I want to talk about the Trump agenda with you, given the fact that he's going to have this primetime speech to Congress. But before we get to that, these last couple of weeks of Mr. Trump's first days in office have been dominated by attacks on the media and the intelligence community. And here is Chief Strategist Steve Bannon at the CPAC conference this week.
They're corporatist, globalist media that are adamantly opposed to an economic nationalist agenda like Donald Trump has.
There certainly were a lot of ists there, corporatist and globalist and nationalist, but you have said that you think that this president needs to have a kind of laser focus on his economic agenda. Do all of these attacks on the media and intelligence and opponents, does that get in the way of that message?
Chris, what the problem is that the media continues to, run a false narrative about this president. And if they would just cover him fairly, and what the president said at his press conference, where he spent 77 minutes fielding questions from the media, is, look, I'll take bad stories, but just report fairly and accurately on what we're doing. And they've refused to do that time and time again. We've seen front page stories in the Washington Post, in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, which are just 100% factually inaccurate. And the response is, oops, we made a mistake, or we've updated it, and that the White House has denied these things.
Why not just pursue his agenda? Here's what President Trump tweeted late Friday night. Fake news media knowingly doesn't tell the truth, a great danger to our country. He may be right in that or he may be wrong in it, Corey, but how many jobs does that create?
Well, Chris, the president is out creating jobs. We see what he's done with Boeing Corporation. We've seen what he's done with Carrier Corporation. We see time and time again he's bringing companies in saying, what can we do to create a better environment for the American business community? He's reducing regulations. He's passed an executive order that says for every new executive order, we're going to reduce 2 executive orders, 2 regulations, so that businesses can grow. That's what the president's doing. He's bringing companies in to say, what can we do to grow? The media doesn't want to report that. The media wants to report false stories of the removal of Martin Luther King Jr.'s bust from the Oval Office, which we know to be factually inaccurate. They want to write a story about a story of national security, which is absolutely factually false, particularly when you have the director of national intelligence or you have the director of the CIA saying that the story that you have written has a false narrative in it, and the media doesn't want to report that. They have their own agenda, and this is the first president in a lifetime that has the ability to fight back through his almost 100 million people who follow him through the various mediums and social media. He has to do this to get the real story out to the American people.
All right, but I want to press my point on this. There's no question that the president has signed a number of executive orders, and we've reported on all of them. But in terms of his legislative agenda, he's falling behind where other new presidents have been at the same point in their terms. And one of the questions I've got, particularly given the fact that he's going to give his speech to Congress this week, how important is it for him, given the fact that there are some splits inside the Republican Party, to give marching orders, to give direction of where he wants to see Republicans in Congress and the House and Senate go in passing his agenda?
Well, it's very important, and I think what this administration has said, and you heard from the Secretary of the Treasury, where they're looking at the first full tax change since 1986, the first fundamental tax change. They're hoping to get that done in the coming months. We know that the president has said during his press conference that he's going to submit a plan for the full repeal and replacement of Obamacare. What we know about Obamacare, Chris, is that premiums are up over 100% in many of these states. Private companies are pulling out. The plans are a failure. The promises that were made to the American people of if you want your doctor, if you like your plan, you can keep it, are not factually correct. His agenda is moving forward through Congress. What he has done in the first 35 or 36 days is the executive orders that didn't require the confirmation process or the approval of Congress. Very important. And if you look, he's put coal miners back to work. They were in the White House last week saying, thank you, Mr. President, for giving us the opportunity to get back to work every day. He's meeting with car executives. He's meeting with airline executives. What can the government do to stimulate the economy so that we're not growing at 1%, but we're growing at 4% or 5%? We finally have an OMB director, an Office of Management and Budget, who can finally look at the budget. And as the president puts together his budget, it is his moral belief that the government needs to be leaner and more efficient and more business friendly. I think that's what you'll see coming out of his budget in the near future.
But Corey, let's take a specific example. You mentioned a bunch there: Obamacare, repeal and replace. 11 million people gained health care coverage through the expansion of Medicaid. There are now, as I say, there's a split inside the Republican Party because a lot of congressional Republicans look back home at their states where people gained coverage through the expansion of Medicaid. They don't want to give that up. There are others who say we want to stop the expansion of Medicaid. Does the president need, in his speech on Tuesday, to help settle that issue? Because there's a real split inside the GOP.
Well, I think what the president is going to use during his speech on Tuesday, he's going to talk about a number of things. He's going to talk about the accomplishments of his first month in office and the executive orders that he's outlined. The second thing he's going to talk about, though, is the economic security our country needs. And that's about education. It's about jobs. That's very important. The third thing that I think the president is probably going to talk about is border security, taking care of our veterans, national security. He has talked about this in general, the need to increase spending on the military. But when it comes specifically to Obamacare, Chris, you have to remember, there are multiple states where the premiums for these people are up over 100%. Small businesses can't afford this. Individuals who are on the plan can't afford this anymore.
Corey, I understand the campaign against Obamacare. The question is, what are you going to do to replace it? And that's what a lot of people are concerned about. Let me ask you about another.
But That's what the White House is working on right now with the members of Congress. And what the president said during his press conference is by the second or third week of March, they'll have a plan up on the Hill. The Hill's going to be working on this already to make sure that there is a unified component so that people can actually have health care coverage. The president's been very clear about this. He has a giant heart. What he said was, we're not going to throw people out on the street. We're going to take care of our people. But you have to do it in a manner that doesn't have increases of 100+% so people can't afford to cover themselves anymore.
Let me move on to another subject. The president also plans to roll out a revised travel ban this week that will cut off people, visitors, and refugees coming from certain countries. But a report that was leaked this week by the Department of Homeland Security said this, and let's put it up on the screen. Country of citizenship is unlikely, is unlikely to be a reliable indicator of potential terrorist activity. Two questions. What does the president do about these continued leaks from within his administration? And secondly, you know, when you get something like this from DHS, there's a possibility that it's going to get blocked again, his new travel order. Maybe he should forget about the travel orders and just go to extreme vetting.
Well, let me say the first part, you're absolutely right. And I think, you know, I don't speak for the administration. I speak for Corey Lewandowski, citizen. Any information that's being leaked out of this administration needs to have a lid put on it. And it's very hard to do when you've got career bureaucrats sitting in these government agencies who have access to information that have a completely different agenda. And if the Senate would confirm the president's selections for secretary and then the under positions, we could stop those things. That's very important to do. So hopefully the Senate will take those up and confirm those. The second component of this is, if you listen to what John McCain said, someone who has been quick to criticize the president, he's talked about General Mattis and General Kelly, General McMaster, the entire national security team. He says it's potentially the best national security team that has ever been assembled. And when you look at that holistically, and the advice that they're giving the president as it relates to a travel ban or having a better vetting process, the president is very open, in my opinion, to listening to what those experts say and writing a plan which makes sure, first and foremost, that the American people are safe and secure in their homeland. And if that means an extreme vetting process, if it means rethinking the way the State Department issues visas, then you have to do that. It's crystal clear. The Constitution is crystal clear.
Corey?
The president has the presidential prerogative to stop anybody he wants from coming into the country by suspending visas. There's no question about it.
Corey, I got less than a minute left. I want to ask you one last thing. A top Republican, House Republican Darrell Issa of California came out over the weekend and said that he thinks that there should be a special prosecutor to investigate this question of links between the Trump campaign and Russian intelligence. He says he doesn't think that the Justice Department and Attorney General Sessions should do it because they're too close to President Trump. What do you think of Issa's idea, special prosecutor?
I think with all due respect, Senator Jeff Sessions, now Attorney General Jeff Sessions, has the utmost character and qualifications. If he wants to investigate this under the Department of Justice, that's his prerogative to do so.
And what do you think Issa's up
Chris,
to?
Because I was on the campaign. Well, I don't know, but let me tell you, because I was on the campaign for 18 months. I ran the campaign. Never, ever, ever did I or anyone that I know of have communication or contact with anyone from Russia or the Russian government whatsoever. So, look, I can tell you this. I have the utmost confidence in Attorney General Sessions. If he believes that there is something there, then he will investigate that. I think he's completely capable and competent to do so. He is a man of the utmost integrity, and I would leave it in his capable hands.
Corey, thank you. Thanks for your time today. Always good to talk with you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Up next, the nation's governors come to Washington to lobby the Trump White House on everything from Obamacare to immigration. Governors Terry McAuliffe of Virginia and Scott Walker of Wisconsin will join us. The nation's governors have come to Washington bringing their wish list for items like infrastructure and their questions about how the president's policies will affect people back in their states. Joining me now, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker, chair of the Republican Governors Association, and Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe, a Democrat and chair of the National Governors Association. Gentlemen, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thanks for having us.
Let's start big. President Trump's first month in office. Governor McAuliffe, how's he doing?
Not great for Virginia, I can tell you, as the governor of the Commonwealth. Not happy about the federal hiring freeze. Very concerned about health care. Could cost literally hundreds of thousands of Virginians their health care. Very concerned. Very concerned about the travel ban. I've been very vocal on that. And concerned about what ICE officers are now doing, randomly stopping people in the Commonwealth.
All right, we're going to dig down into a few of those in a minute. Governor Walker, big picture. You had lunch with the president yesterday at the White House. What did you talk about?
Healthcare. You know, it's a concern we all have. I mean, we as governors, we want personalized, patient-centered healthcare that treats people not like a number, but like a human being. And I think that's a common sense that we want, and certainly something the president talked and was very interested in. As I came back, in fact, Terry and I and others were listening to his Secretary of Health and Human Services. I'm hopeful we'll have a plan that goes beyond repeal and gets to a replace and reform plan that helps all the people in Wisconsin, Virginia, everywhere else.
The reason I want you here is to drill down on parts of the Trump agenda and how it's going to affect people in your states. Let's start with Obamacare repeal and replace. And we should point out, Governor McAuliffe, that in your state, even though you're a Democratic governor, you couldn't expand Medicaid as part of it because the Republican legislature blocked you. What are you concerned about in terms of replacement?
Well, first of all, in Virginia, we did not do it. We have forfeited $7.9 billion, Chris. I could have had 400,000 individuals get health care, could have created 30,000 new jobs. But my concern going forward is if we just eliminate the ACA, it costs the Virginia budget $200 million per year. I lose $157 million pharmaceutical reimbursements right off the bat. So I'm very concerned about how we do this going forward. We don't like block grants. If you're going to block grant us, we're going to have a set number. And what happens if we have a recession? What happens if the stock market goes down? We at the state level will have to incur those costs. I'm very worried about the per capita rate. So these are big issues. But Scott's right. We're here for the governors. You know, I serve as chair of the governors. We have 46, our biggest crowd ever. We want to work together. We want to get everybody quality health care. We want personalized medicine. I agree with Scott. People need to be treated like individuals in dignity and not a number, but the devil's in the details.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the details, Governor Walker. And I want to put up some numbers because more than 200,000 people in Wisconsin have gained coverage under Obamacare. The uninsured rate in your state has fallen by 39%. What happens if some of those people lose health care coverage under repeal and replace?
Actually, ours is a model of exactly what will happen under the replace and reform. I didn't take the expansion.
Right.
I didn't take.
But you had your own system.
I'm not a state exchange. No, ours is exactly what you want to model it on going forward. For the first time ever, even without an Obamacare expansion, I cover everyone living in poverty. 100% coverage for people living in poverty. It never happened, Democrat, Republican governor ever before. For those above, we help transition them into the marketplace. To me, that's the goal. As governors, for years, we've said not just in health care.
But can you guarantee that all of those 200,000 people are going to keep coverage?
Well, we have under our plan, we have one of the lowest rates of uninsured. In fact, one of the highest rates of overall insured in the nation because we used reforms to help get people into the marketplace and to make things work there. I think that's exactly what we want as a nation. Governors are more effective. They're more efficient. They're more accountable. For years, governors have said, give us the tools, not just on health care, but on education, transportation, other issues. Now's their chance to do it. We just need to make sure that each of our states, who are very unique, not only the Commonwealth of Virginia and Wisconsin, but all 50 states and their territories are unique, we can make it work if governors work together with a president and a House that I hope will be receptive.
Okay, let's turn to another subject, and that's tax reform. Governor McAuliffe, what do you think of the idea that Republicans, particularly in the House, are pushing of a border adjustment tax? And generally, what do you think of President Trump's talk about renegotiating trade deals?
The border tax is a disaster for the economy. I mean, you look at Virginia, we're a big ag state.
Let me just quickly point out, border adjustment tax, you would tax imports coming in, you wouldn't tax exports going out.
And let's be very clear. Countries around the globe are not going to sit there and wait for this. They will reciprocate immediately against the United States of America. I'm a big trade state. I've been on 22 trade missions to dozens of countries. Our economy is very strong today, Chris. When I became governor, unemployment was 5.4. We got it all the way to 3.7, 185,000 new jobs. Why? We're trading around all over the globe. If we treat countries like this, they're going to reciprocate against that. I've disagreed with some in my party. You give me a fair trade deal, protect worker rights, protect environmental rights. We in America can crush anybody around the globe. We will win this argument. But if we start putting walls up around our states and our country, it's a global economy. 95% of the world's customers, Chris, live outside the United States of America. We can't just trade with ourselves to grow our economies.
Let me bring Governor Walker in this. Your state exported $22 billion in goods to foreign markets in 2015. Are you worried about if you set up border taxes, you set up border trade deal, you get out of some of these trade deals, that it's going to hurt that?
We want good trade. We want it to be fair, and we want it to be free. We want to have trade with all the different countries you talked about. We want to make sure that if a Harley Davidson is sold in Japan or China, it's treated the same way that a Kawasaki or Toyota might be sold if it's coming into the state of Wisconsin or any other state in the United States out there. So fair and free trade go hand in hand. But I think the other issue that the House and the Senate really need to focus in on, certainly the president's talking about, is let's just bring the employer tax rate down so that it's comparable with the rest of the industrialized world. The states that have succeeded, our state employed more people last year than ever before. Why? Because we got government out of the way. We lowered the tax burden. In fact, by the time my budget's done, in 8 years, we have cut taxes by more than $8 billion.
Let me ask McAuliffe about that. I mean, wouldn't lowering corporate tax rates and making them more competitive with the rest of the world be a good idea?
Oh, do I think we need tax reform? Absolutely. The more we can reform taxes, put more money into people's pockets so they can spend more, is by far the single biggest stimulant we can do for our economy today. We definitely, let's bring back this overseas money, repatriate this money that's overseas. Let's bring it back to America. We got to make it attractive to the individuals and the CEOs and the shareholders to bring the money back. But of course we ought to do that. And this is my point. These are the big issues that I wish President Trump would focus on. He ran on jobs. Right now in Virginia, he's hurting me on jobs. Let's go back to focus on what we do in Virginia every day, growing and diversifying our economy into cybersecurity, solar, all the renewable energies, biotech. That's how you grow economies. 4.25 million workers in Virginia, the most ever.
I want to move on to another subject. Governor Walker, you opposed candidate Trump's Muslim ban during the campaign. Is the new order that we understand the president is going to sign this week, is that in effect a cleaned up version of the same Muslim travel ban?
No.
And how do you feel also about DHS's stepped up enforcement of immigration?
No, it's not, because if it was, it wouldn't be limited to those countries. It's very much aligned with where there's a safety concern. You know, under President Obama, all of us governors, NG actually set it up.
You got the DHS saying the country of citizenship doesn't. The citizenship country is not a reliable indicator of terrorism.
But all of the governors who were on when President Obama was in place, when they started bringing in refugees en masse from Syria, got on a call with the head of the Department of Homeland Security, and were very concerned, even including many Democrats, saying, what kind of certainty do we have to know, particularly after in light of what's happened in Europe, that there's been a good system of vetting and understanding who's coming into our respective states? That's what we're asking for. Now, do they need to modify and adjust it? Possibly. But going forward, if the objective is to make sure that safety is paramount, and that's really what we're all about. At the local, state, and federal level, more than anything else, we're responsible to our citizens for the safety of our fellow citizens. That's what it should be about. It shouldn't be about religion. Shouldn't be about anything else. It should ultimately be about safety.
Governor McAuliffe, first of all, is this travel order, is it about religion? And secondly, your thoughts about stepped up deportations.
Well, it's very disconcerting. People think it's about religion and they think it's about geography, and that's very damaging to our economy. I go back, this is not helping us create jobs. I was out at Dulles Airport within 12 hours.
Oh, I mean, wait a minute. If you're protecting the country, I mean, doesn't that come before jobs?
Chris, let's be very clear. Everybody's for protecting the country. We have a very vigorous program in the United States of America to check two-year process on refugees and other related visas. Let's be clear. We're all in agreement. We want to keep our country safe. But there is a very fine line. I went out to Dulles Airport. I was probably the first elected official out of the box because I was tipped off. There was a family there detained for hours, 2 children, U.S. passports, no access to legal counsel. So I went out and I said, I'm the governor. This airport's in my state. I want to know why they're being detained. I'm very concerned, and I'm meeting with General Kelly in the next hour to talk about how this ICE enforcement is going on, because let's go back to the economy. If we are randomly going to stop people on the streets, Chris, let me tell you, it is going to drive people underground. They're not going to seek health care. They're not going to work with law enforcement. 32.5% of the economy in Northern Virginia, small business, is by foreign-owned businesses. We are scaring people. Discrimination breeds hatred, and we got to stop it. Let's work together. Of course, we want to be safe.
I think part of that is, and you see it not only amongst elected officials, but in the media, it's one thing to say, it's another thing to see what the facts are. I'm glad we're going to have that discussion later, because I think it's important for all of us as governors and elected officials to know what exactly is it.
I got 30 seconds left, and given what you were just saying, Governor McAuliffe, you're only allowed to serve one term in Virginia. That term ends at the end of this year. You say that the only thing you'd be interested in, I love the look you're giving me, is an executive job. Would you think about running against Donald Trump in 2020?
I have 11 months left as the governor of the great Commonwealth of Virginia. We have had tremendous success diversifying and growing our economy. I am going to finish up. I have no intentions of running against Donald Trump. I want to finish up strong. I'm telling you, Chris, Virginia's first governor, Patrick Henry, second governor, Thomas Jefferson, and now Terry McAuliffe. What a great job I have.
That's right.
What a great country. What a great country.
Yeah, and one of them ended up as president. Yeah. Governor Walker, Governor McAuliffe, thank you both for coming in today. Always good to talk with you.
The forgotten men and women of America will be forgotten no longer. That is the heart of this new movement and the future of the Republican Party.
President Trump laying out a new path for the GOP, addressing conservatives at the CPAC conference this week. And it's time now for our Sunday group. Advisor to former British Prime Minister David Cameron, Steve Hilton. Fox News political analyst and columnist for The Hill, Juan Williams. Julie Pace, who covers the White House for the Associated Press. And Washington Examiner contributor, Lisa Booth. And Steve, first-time Fox News Sunday panelist, welcome.
Well, it's great to be here, Chris. I just wish there's more to talk about. Very boring
You become an American commentator, and we give you this fire hose to drink out of. Julie. As we've been discussing, there are some divides among congressional Republicans. Forget about the Democrats on issues like Obamacare and tax reform. Do you expect the president in his primetime speech, if not to settle those issues, to give some direction?
Well, Republicans are certainly hoping to get some direction on a couple of key things. One, tax reform, how to pay for it. This border adjustability program that Paul Ryan's office is really pushing, but Senate Republicans are opposed to. Paul Ryan's office is looking for a really clear signal from the president that he supports this. He's been talking more warmly about it, but hasn't given a full-throated endorsement. I think Obamacare, though, is what Republicans and Democrats are going to be looking for some real direction on, because this is one that is going to come up first ahead of tax reform on Capitol Hill. And while Republicans are fully on board with the idea of repealing Obamacare, there are huge divisions over what a replace package would look like. And first, President Trump said he wanted to see them move quickly on this. Now he said this could go into next year. And beyond outlining the couple of popular provisions of Obamacare that he wants to keep, he really hasn't talked in detail about what the rest of the replace package would look like, how he would look to pay for it, and what this would do to people who might lose coverage under the current program.
Obviously not really into the details, but some kind of direction in this speech?
Everything we've heard from the White House so far is that we should expect sort of a broader address, that this is going to be more his vision for the country, less a kind of laundry list. But I think that you're seeing Republicans behind the scenes trying to push the White House to get a little bit more specific than maybe they're hoping to right now.
We heard from the president's chief strategist, Steve Bannon, this week. For a lot of people, it was the first time they had literally ever heard his voice. And here's what he had to say about Trump priorities at the CPAC conference.
The first is kind of national security and sovereignty. The second line of work is what I refer to as economic nationalism. The third, broadly, line of work is what is deconstruction of the administrative state.
Steve, we don't think of Donald Trump as especially ideological, but Steve Bannon clearly is. Does this kind of intellectual overlay, as I say, there are a lot of ists in it, does that serve this president?
I think that there are elements of it that do, but I think that actually you're right, that he's more pragmatic, and that's what really Trump is more pragmatic, and I think that that's what he really needs to convey in this speech. I think Julie's exactly right that he will cover a lot of ground and it will be broad. However, I think it really needs to have a focus, and the focus has to be on the issue that really got him elected, and I think that is his promise to deal with the economic crisis, the real economic crisis that is affecting around half of Americans without a job, with incomes that have fallen for the last couple of decades, people who've lost that sense of economic security and hope. That's what he's got to focus on. And the elements of that are pretty straightforward, much more straightforward, actually, than anything on Obamacare. It's the tax cut, the business tax cut, and the repatriation so that money is invested here in America. And it's the infrastructure, which we almost seem to have forgotten about. That was a big part of his campaign promise. So I think he's got to put the focus on getting the economy moving.
We ask you for questions for the panel, and on this issue of what the president should tell Congress, we got a number like this. A tweet from VG, stay on topic. Job creation, taxes, healthcare, stay positive. Bring the country together. Don't talk about critics. And this on Facebook from Kathy Roberts, it would be nice if he would start to unite this divided country and start a healing process. He's still campaigning for a job he won. Lisa, what do you think of the advice and how likely that President Trump will follow it?
I would agree with the advice. I mean, I do think that President Trump realizes that he's going to be addressing Congress, and I think he does realize about the challenges that he faces, because if you look at the dynamics, particularly in the Senate, which is really what matters for President Trump in trying to move his agenda forward, there's a lot of complexities there, both with Republicans who have already voiced objection, whether it's over the border adjustment tax or with even, the differing opinions on how to move Obamacare forward. And then you also have those 10 vulnerable Democrats who might also be facing primary challenges to their left. So there's a lot of complexities that he's going to be dealing with. So I think he recognizes that this is an opportunity for him to set the agenda, to lay it out, hopefully offering some more specifics. But I do think that we'll see a little bit more of a positive tone than maybe we saw at CPAC or some of the more recent speeches that he's given.
Well, and that brings up the question, Juan, are all of these attacks, because certainly, if not for the first 2 weeks, certainly for the last 2 weeks, so many attacks on the media, so many attacks on political opponents, are they serving this president well politically, or do you think it's getting in the way of his agenda?
Well, I think obviously with the base, demonizing the press, it seems to me to be a continuation of the campaign in which he goes after Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, even the intelligence agencies that are looking into his ties to Russia. But even as it feeds the base and their distaste for mainstream media and persuades them, listen to me, don't listen to the press and my critics, it serves as a distraction from the fact that he has accomplished so little of the pledges that he made to his backers during the campaign. Obamacare, tax reform, build the wall. These things haven't happened. There's a fact check out today, Washington Post, that says he's only done about 10% of all the things that he said he would get done in the first 100 days.
Well, it's only been 1 month.
Right, but I think that it's critical. I think it's critical to understand. He was talking about things that he would get done out of the box that would transform this government, drain the swamp, that there's so little progress on that front. And when we come back to the press, you see a very interesting thing here. The Quinnipiac poll this week showing that despite his constant attacks, saying the press is the enemy of the American people, Steve Bannon telling the press, shut up, you were wrong about the election, so just shut up and listen. Guess what? The American people still trust the press and First Amendment rights more than they trust this president.
I actually disagree with Juan here, surprising. But no, I think that President Trump actually has a lot of room to run. Because if you look at polling, Democrats are really the only group of voters that trust the media. You look at the most recent Gallup poll regarding the media, only 14% of Republicans trust the media, only 30% of independents.
But to a certain degree, that's beside the point. I mean, he's not going to... As I said in my conversation with Corey Lewandowski, he can bash the press all he wants. It doesn't create jobs.
It doesn't create jobs, but what it does do, but also what is he supposed to do? You look at the general election, 91% of the coverage was negative towards him. You look at the fact that
he's president.
I understand that, but I know, but this coverage has carried in to his administration as well. There's been a lot of completely blatantly false stories out there regarding made-up meetings between Steve Bannon and General Kelly. I mean, there's been the information surfacing the dossier which every publication said is unsubstantiated, unverified. There's been numerous reports that have not been true, and I think John Dickerson was correct.